firstly, what do we call technology? Right? What is technology all about? Well, in reality, right, technology is something that humans have developed, right? And it's not just electronics, right? Who plays music here without technology? Put your hand up. So what do you do?
Conduct orchestras?
No. Orchestras are full of it.
Oh.
Sing? What else?
Play an instrument sometimes.
No instrument, that's technology. Yeah. It's only noises your body can make. Right? As soon as you have any implement, a stick, anything, that's a piece of technology. And you have adapted it to a purpose. Computers were not designed for music. People adapt them to use in music. Right? So keep that in mind, that everything you do is technology. However, that's not what the day is about. We don't have orchestras, we don't have jazz bands, stage bands, whatever. Right? Technology that most of us think about these days is ICT. Right? Information Communications Technology. It's all about things like computers, iPads, tablets, right? As well as electronic performance devices, which is a new thing to most of us, scary for most of us, right? Playing music and composing music on things that don't even look like a musical instrument, right? These are the reality. And also, the internet opens up a whole new range of things. If you think about the internet now, it's really not the internet, it's a matter of the fact that we are connected through so many ways. And if you think about it, where do kids learn things these days? Through their peers, through social media, right? In fact, there's statistics now that show that more learning is done outside of school by kids that want to learn what they want to learn, then go to school and are told to learn things they don't want to learn, right? Pedagogy has changed. And I will talk a little bit about that later, but if you think about what you're here today to do, you're here to learn something that you can go back to school tomorrow and apply, do, right? You have got something in your mind to say, I want to learn something, I'm here because I want to do something, right? No one's told you have to come. Whereas the kids go to school, they go because they really want to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, all that sort of stuff, where they're told they have to go. So pedagogy is really the art, the science, and the theory, if you like, of teaching children. And if you think about teaching children, you're teaching them things that you know they need to know that they don't know they need to know. Right? You are preparing them for the future, a long time into the future. Now, what did I do when I was a child? If I wanted to learn something other than school, I didn't have a lot of choices. The font of all knowledge was the teacher, my parents, or I'd go and get a magazine or go to the library or whatever. These days, you've got so many sources to go and learn something that I'm personally interested in. So if I want to become an electrician or anything, electrician you've got to get qualified for, but if I want to learn something, I can go to YouTube, I can go to social media, and I can say, this is cool, I can get the answers now, right? So somehow the pedagogy, and that's by the way called andragogy, it's how adults learn. Adults learn on the basis of what they want to know, what their business wants to know, what their job is now, and apply it. So what you've got to try and do is excite and inspire kids to want to learn the things that you know they've got to learn, right? And that's the hard part. And if we concentrate today's session, these are the 4 things that we're concentrating on, right? These are all related to music, obviously, but learning, responding, creating, producing, and performing, which we collectively call the creative side, right? And assessing, which is more for you, right? Using the technology to do all of those things. And this is what the day is about, effective integration of technology in music education, right, if you think of that. And hopefully we'll inspire, we'll inform, and I'll talk about this separately, empower you to actually make it happen. Because quite often you come to sessions like this or days like this, you get inspired, right? Jim's fantastic talk, and you'll go to a whole lot of sessions, you'll get these great ideas, and then what? You go back to work. Yep, that was good, I'll go next year. Right? You have no idea how, I can't afford it, there's too many things, I've got this, I've got the assessment, all this stuff. But we're actually trying to get constant improvement in learning, and that's constant improvement on both sides of the fence, for the students, their learning, and also your job. How many people here get drilled by TPAC? Okay, I'll tell you, TPAC is about technology, pedagogy, and content, right? In other words, curriculum, right? So technology, knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and content knowledge or curriculum. And those things are three things have got to go together, right? So this is a 2-minute introduction to that concept.
Here's TPAC in 2 minutes. For more information, visit tpac.org. So first we have to ask, what is it? Well, TPAC is a framework that combines 3 knowledge areas: our technological knowledge, content knowledge, and our pedagogical knowledge. And it looks at how they work together to increase student motivation and to make the content more accessible to students. We look at the content as the what. It's the subject matter we're teaching, like ecology, music, algebra, health, geometry, or art history, to name a few. Then we look at our pedagogical knowledge. It's the how. Every teacher has tools, so let's put them to use. Are we going to be using direct instruction? Will this be inquiry-based, group discussions? How are we going to make the content more accessible by the way we present it to our students? Then we look at selecting the appropriate technology because it's the partner. What tool will we select to make the content more accessible to the students while supporting the pedagogical strategy which we've identified will help to deliver this information to students? We must identify those support features to really help us use technology to reach our outcome. As we understand them individually, we can start to see overlaps. Our TP knowledge allows us to understand how we're making the content more accessible. Our TC knowledge allows us to identify the affordances of pairing the appropriate technology to the content. And our PC knowledge allows us to identify the affordances of pairing the appropriate pedagogical strategies with the content. TPAC comes from the overlapping in that center spot, or as we refer to it as the sweet spot, when all 3 knowledge areas work together. It's crucial to remember that surrounding this is the context. That's you and your students. This may look differently when you walk into classrooms because at the heart of TPAC is meeting students' needs.
Okay, so they're frameworks that we think about when we're putting all of these sessions together, right? Getting those 3 areas of knowledge working together. Your knowledge of pedagogy, which I said keeps changing, curriculum, which keeps changing, right? And of course technology, which keeps changing. So you're juggling 3 things all the time, and if you just do the technology that's good for the content, that may not be the best way to deliver it from a pedagogical point of view. So if you keep these things in the back of your mind when you're going through all of that, it can help. Now, what are some of the current and emerging trends that are out there, right? This is some of the blue sky stuff, crystal ball. It's not all that bad though. Firstly, the general trends, right, is what I mentioned before. How people want to learn anywhere, anytime, right? They don't just go to school to learn anymore, right? And particularly adults, but students are the same. And they want to use their own technology. And also, as Jim mentioned earlier, they want to be able to compose and make music on the same technology platforms that they consume it, right? That's the way students and adults thinking. You think right now, who's on Facebook? Right. Who just uses it for social reasons? Who? 1, 2, not many. Who uses it as part of your professional learning network? Okay, are kids any different? Right, they're out there doing this all the time. And then you sit them down in a school and you've got a whole different approach. I'm pleased though that you're not looking at it right now. It's a good thing. Somebody called it the weapon of mass distraction. I think it was Jim. Yeah. And also personalisation, right? In other words, where you learn, how you learn, what technology you use. These are the challenges. This is a general trend that you're not going to change. You have to live with it. But the other trends, and this is a very good guide, I suggest that you look at this every year. It's one that we look at and it's been very accurate for the last 10 years. It's called the Horizon Report. I won't give you the URL, it's too long, but if you go and Google Horizon Report K to 12, there's quite a few Horizon reports. There's some for senior education and so on, but the Horizon Report K to 12 has a look at what the things are that are going to impact on education from a technological point of view, and it's not just music, it's broad-based, over the next 1 to 2 years, 3 to 4 years and 5 years and beyond. And everything that it's predicted in that period has come true, right? So it gives you a very good idea of what's coming. And this is what's happening. The 2017 one had 2 things in the short term, right, that are going to be affecting K to 12. Coding as a literacy, right? You're getting that, aren't you? Yes. And that absolutely applies to music as much as anything else, and there's sessions today to help you do that. And the other, which is really good to see, the rise of STEAM learning. Right, now everyone here talks STEM still, the STEM centres, STEM this, STEM that. Right, STEAM is rising, and it's rising rapidly. And one of the good examples is CBC here in the city. Hamish is around, I know. That was going to be a STEM centre in the city, they're rebuilding. It's now called a STEAM centre. Right, that's a big step in the right direction. So it's gathering momentum. So that's a good thing to know. The other thing is, and this is the technology aspects, maker spaces and robotics. Now what's that got to do with music, you say? Maker spaces are very relevant to music, mostly at the primary level at this stage. Right, when you're using makey, coding, all those sort of things, you're making instruments, you're making music, you're doing it with coding, you're doing it with gadgets. Right, it's all happening now. And there's sessions here today about it. The other one is robotics. Now, robotics, you might say, what, you're going to get a robot to play music or something? Right, no. Robotics are, have you ever heard of B-bots? Judith Bell from Christchurch, one of our EdNet mentors, did a session last year in Auckland at DAYTiME using B-bots to make music, right? And she had a big floor of a stave, and the kids had to program, well, the kids, teachers in this case, had to program to go out to certain lines and spaces to make chords and all sorts of things. And then she did computational thinking, which is something 3 to 5 years down the track in the report. And sadly, only 5 people went to that session. Right? It's too early. And if I can put that into context, the first DAYTiME we had in Sydney in 2014, we did a session there on Ableton and using pad controllers. We had the chap that runs Ableton Live School in Sydney who was a genius, and he had 1 person in his session. 1. It was a fantastic session, by the way. Right? Now, today we've got Ryan Gerlach from Marriotteville who's doing a session on exactly that. It's the biggest session of the day. He's got 37 people in there. It's come a long way because they started, you know, people are starting to adopt and accept some of that different technology. Robots won't be any different, right? So get used to it and get excited by it. The Gartner Hype Cycle, who's heard of that? Quite a few? Yeah, the Gartner is a company in the US that actually puts together life cycles of technology. It looks at from the time a piece of technology is developed and what it can be expected, you know, in terms of its growth and life cycle. And this has a few things. Firstly, the side axis there is the expectations that you have for this technology, and the one on the bottom is over time, how these expectations change. So what happens is something is developed or invented, a piece of technology, and then it rises in popularity, and then it gets to a point where it's inflated. Everyone thinks this is going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, it's going to change my life, everyone's got to have it, right? So then they all rush out and buy it, right? And then what happens is it slides down this curve, and it's not quite what I thought it was, it's getting a bit, then you get to the trough of disillusionment. And you think, oh, that piece of stuff, that's really useless, you know, we got all hyped up about it, it was on the news, all the rest of it. Because what happens is, of course, it gets up about this far on the curve and it hits all the local television, you know, like Today, Tonight and Current Affair, and everyone says, oh wow, I've got to buy it. And so then everyone gets on the bandwagon, and once it's up here, it's on everything that you ever see on Facebook, Twitter, the whole bit, you've got to buy it. And then you find out, oh, it doesn't quite do what I thought, right? A good example would be interactive whiteboards, right? iPads, right? I'm not saying iPads aren't now in mainstream, but they were going to do everything. They're going to get rid of computers, they're going to change the way you're only going to have an iPad, that was it, right? Not so, right? Then what happens is, after you get down here, then you start to look at this thing and you think, actually this has got some value, this is, okay, it doesn't do all those things, but it actually does some good stuff, right? So then you end up getting to the point of enlightenment. You say, now this bit of technology is good for this. And finally, you get the plateau of productivity where now this is mainstream, we just use this, right? And so let's have a look at some of the stuff that now is coming through, will come through, and stuff that you know about to put this into context, right? Artificial intelligence. This is right down here, early days. A lot of people talking about it. It's happening. And artificial intelligence doesn't mean somebody or machines that think totally. They don't have emotions, but they can be taught to learn and then learn from information. And I don't know whether you knew about it, but the NAPLAN tests were going to be marked by artificial intelligence. That's now gone through because of the unions upset about that, thinking that these things are going to overtake the world, right? The point is that this will happen, right? So it's a good thing in some ways, because it means your workload might get easier, right? If you don't have to do all the marking, it's all great. That's a little ways off. 5 to 7 years is the estimated time frame before it gets over here, right? That's according to the report. Next one is virtual and augmented reality in education. You ever heard of that? Erasma? Erasma is augmented reality. A lot of primary teachers are using it in music. I don't know if somebody's going to be using it here today, but they have had sessions on it in the past. Right? It's fantastic. I'll let you look it up, because once you look it up and try it, you'll be hooked. Right? Kids will love it. MOOC platforms. MOOC platforms, not MOOCs themselves, not massive open online courses that the unis run, but the platforms to deliver teaching out there through the connected world. Right? This stuff is happening, and if you think about that, right, that you'll have expert teachers putting fantastic materials and courses together that can be delivered at any time, 24/7, when you want it. Right? This will have an impact on teaching in schools because it will be available in schools. But right now it's available outside of schools by brilliant people. What are they? Things like Teachable. Teachable, look that up. Udemy. Right? And there are others. There's the one called the Blackboard make, and Moodle make one as well. Right? These are platforms that people put courses together, and people can either buy them in some cases or deliver them through a network. Right? So that means that you could have things that you want to teach in school that you may not be the best person to teach it, but you can then bring this stuff in, and it's part of the flipped classroom concept. It doesn't have to be done at school, right? It can be done outside of school. Another is the classroom 3D printing. What does that have to do with music? This is now up here at the peak of expectations almost. Everyone's now getting on this in the STEM area. Woodville High School. You've got 3 or 4 of these 3D printers in the new STEM centre there, right? Yep, okay. Are you going to be making musical instruments on them?
We'll be making mouthpieces.
Mouthpieces, there you go, right? So that's something that will impact, right? Because now you're going to talk about technology here, making instruments that you don't even know exist yet. Mouthpieces are old technology, right? But anyhow, digital assessment. A couple of examples there are Socrative. You could be using that stuff in your classroom. Socrative, which will keep track of your students' work, right? There are others, there's Formative, there's quite a few others. These are now sliding down a little bit because everyone thought that these things were going to be, all your marking would be done this way, and it would be just so simple, and then it's not quite that way. And so you've got to come down the curve a little bit. A little ways away yet becoming mainstream, but it's not that far. Gamification. Gamification has been in schools for a while. It's gone through the peak expectations. Everyone was going to jump on that game wagon. It's now down here. Right, and about 12 months it will be over here and start to become mainstream, right, where you turn everything into a gaming process where kids level up to learn and all those sorts of processes. Another one is cloud computing. Now this is on the slope of enlightenment. This is very close to becoming mainstream, right, and the things that Jim was talking about, right, is absolutely the way. Now the things that are impeding this at the moment are more about the technology that it needs to support it, Wi-Fi and bandwidths and all those sorts of things. But they're coming together. The NBN is wonderful, isn't it? E-textbooks, right, they're now in the mainstream. E-textbooks means electronic books, but also interactive ones. And by bringing your own device, this is now mainstream. Still a lot of problems with it, and the problems are people are not specifying what devices they should have to do what, right? Bring your own device and say, yeah, kids, just go and buy what you want. Just bring. Yeah, you want to do, multi-track recording? You can do it on your phone. You try, right? There's things that you shouldn't have for that, but most of it is the infrastructure to support it, the Wi-Fi, and the rules about what sort of gear you should have. And finally, the flipped classroom is now mainstream. Right? People are flipping the learning, and it's not always flipping the classroom to learn outside. A lot of people flip it in, so they can come to school and flip it in while the teachers are there. Okay, we're nearly there. I did tell you that I was going to empower you today, right, or try. One of the problems that we've had in the past, and Ableton and those sessions highlighted this, right? When it became popular about 2 years ago, people went in there and they saw Ableton software, able to push controllers, and they said, it's fantastic, but it's totally irrelevant. We'll never be able to afford it, it's ridiculous, it's just not going to happen, right? That's not true, right? Money is never your problem. You only think it is, right? It's about planning and leadership, right? These are the excuses. We're a poor school, low socioeconomic area, or in New Zealand, low decile, things are tight, right? We're a low fee government school, right? All the excuses that you don't have money. That's what you get told and you believe it, right? In actual fact, these are the general rules, and this is documented evidence you get from my school, OECD reports, right? The average high school, secondary school, has $15,000 per student funding. That's operating funding, not buildings, right? That's how they run the school. $15,000 per student is the average. Primary is about $10,000. In secondary schools, 80% of that money goes in salaries, which is fair enough. You're the expensive part, right? 80% of secondary schools, it goes in salaries. About 2% is ICT. Now you put that into context. If you've got a secondary school with 1,000 students, you've got a $15 million operating budget. If you've got 2% in ICT, that's a $300,000 ICT budget. That's quite separate from everything else, but that includes just the gear that you're doing. It doesn't include the salaries of the staff. That's already covered. Right? 2.5% in utilities, repairs, maintenance and furniture. That's even more than the ICT. 1.5% in cleaning. That's a lot, but you've got a big school, you've got to keep it clean. And about 1% are the provisions in things like replacements and things like computers and things that have to be turned over every 4 years or whatever. Now, it works out that you have about 13% of the budget left for the key learning areas. Roughly divide that by your 8 and you should know what you can get. In music, from our experience, and we've done a lot of this, the average school gets $19 per student for music. And that's $19 of the total school population, not just those doing music. So if you've got a high school of 1,000 students, you should have a music budget of about $19,000 to be on average. And if you laugh at that, right, and many people do, right, you can change that. You can change it, and I'll give you an example in a moment. Right, now, in primary schools, 10,000, there's less money in salaries because you don't have many subject teachers and therefore you've got a lower ratio of teachers, right? Here's some examples, real ones. Scotch College in South Australia. Their income per student is $24,000, and most of that extra money doesn't go to the music department. That's usually an extra staff, right? Quite often groundspeople or whatever, right? That cover. But the real interesting one here, Christie's Beach, low socioeconomic area, $18,000. Marriotteville High School, $4,000 a student less. Did you dream that that would be the case? No. 4 years ago, we had a lot of work to do with Christie's Beach, right? The teachers that were there for many years, we knew them for a long time. They used to get an annual budget of about $3,000 for music. And it was hopeless, right? And usually every year you put a budget request in, you get $3,000. You put a budget request in, you get $3,000. And stuff had been bought over the years that were just all disjointed, and, right? And fortunately, new music teacher, new principal comes in 4 years ago and asks us to come in and give them advice. And we said, first thing you need to do is put a plan together. We put a plan together, big document, and we said, you need to spend about $80,000 to get this up to scratch. $80,000. Now, that is not something that normally happens, right? You'll do this over time, but at least you know how much you need. So you then came back at the budget time and said, how much should we ask for? Should I ask for 10 or 15? Or I said, no, you ask for the 80 and you justify it. And then when you only get 10 or 15 or whatever, we'll have a look at the priorities and work towards it. So everything you spend from now on goes in the right direction. She came back in January and said, you're not going to believe it. I got the lot. I got the lot. Training, furniture, equipment. Why? The money is there. It's a matter of the allocation of it, the priorities. There's always money that can be allocated. As you know, 18,000 a student is 3,000 more than the country average. Right? Have a look at this one down here, 20,000 at Northern Beaches. Northern Beaches is supposedly a very rich school in the northern suburbs of Sydney. And they've got a fantastic music program. That's what it looks like. Right? They gutted the place. They changed all the rooms. They've got 50, 60 kids in there with 2 teachers doing all different pods, right? And they've got just about every bit of technology. And they've only got $2,000 more than Christie's Beach. It's not the money. That's the point that I want to get across. So when you see things today that get you excited, right? Just say, we can do this. And we will help you. right? We'll put the arguments together, we'll give you all the support. And I've got 2 minutes, right? Very quickly. Right, planning is the very key, right? The most important thing is you think about the big things while you're doing the day-to-day, the little bits. Don't get stuck on the budget cycle, right? Think the vision, right? And I'll give you this so that you can take it away later on. But you start with a blank canvas. Don't let anything get in your way. Just say, if the world is perfect, what do I need, right? Then look at your curriculum. That's the driver. What are you trying to achieve? It's not sacrosanct, right? Because it's going to change, but it's a guide. The other is your pedagogies. Right, how are you going to do this, right, in teaching? And the three things about the pedagogies, you need to have the art, the craft and the science to back you up, right? These are things you just need to put into your planning process. Then, and Jim alluded to this is a big one. Are you flogging a dead horse? Right, you're in a school, you've been there every year, you've done this, and you know that you could do it a lot better if only you had the plan and the money and all the rest of it, and you're not getting anywhere. Right? Well, normally when you're flogging a dead horse, you get off it. Right? And I suggest that's the ultimate solution. However, just to put it into perspective, there's lots of other solutions for riding dead horses. The bottom one is the best. That's really all I've got to say. I hope that's put a context around what you're going to do today. Keep that in mind. We'll see you at the end of the day.